Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Grande Bouffe.
The big feast.
With myself, Cole Smithey, and my co-host, Mike Lacy. As we have done for nearly 100 episodes, we are here to copiously consume international politics and culture through the prism of a single film and a different craft beer. And this week's edition is my favorite film of all time, 1900.
You talk about a single film, this is really stretching the definition of what a single film is.
It's long.
This is Le Grande Bouffe. We're all about gorging ourselves to death, and this film's perfect for that.
Yeah, it's a big one. It's a good old big one.
It's also tasty. It's not one of those entrees you get that you just gotta try, like sea urchin. You know, like it's on the menu of the booth, and you know it's gonna help kill you, but you don't love it. This is the big plate of polenta.
Yeah.
That you're throwing back.
Well, it was made in Parma, and it's about the Belle Epoque era, the coming of the new century, and it covers 50 years of time, so it is truly an epic movie and falls into the historic epic genre very nicely. But it is 5 hours and 20 minutes long, and because of the court problems with the budget and the financing, there were 3 or 4 different versions that were floating around, and the judge voted for the 4-hour and some minute version. But this is obviously...
Wow, the judge was like, this is just ridiculous. 5 hours, 17 minutes, that's the version I watched.
Yeah, he said the judge did the cut the baby open thing. But this version is available. Where did you stream it?
I watched it on Google Play. It was the only one. It's the only version I saw on the internet at all.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness that this is the one that's out
and
there.
It's had its release date as 1990, which I thought was interesting since it came out in 76. But I think that must have been that edition came out in 1990.
I think that's the story, and I'm pretty sure that's when I saw it in 1990. That sounds about right. And I saw it at the Castro Cinema in San Francisco. It had the intermission, and they had the pianist play for 20 minutes during the intermission. And so this was the movie. I guess that tells you how old I was when I saw it. 27. I was 27 when I saw it. I said I thought I was about your age when I saw the movie.
That was the year I was born.
And so this was the movie for me that really changed my whole outlook on
Right.
cinema and just what movies could be. Obviously, the movie stars Burt Lancaster and Donald Sutherland and Gerard Depardieu and Robert De Niro.
Right, it's cool when Robert De Niro is the 4th on that list.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so it was my introduction to Gerard Depardieu, which is pretty amazing. He's amazing in the movie. Everyone's amazing. Dominique Sanda is great. But I guess we should talk about the beer.
Yeah.
I chose Sierra Nevada's Hop Bullet. Really, it's a double IPA. This is certainly a double movie. It's got 2 parts.
Very appropriate.
So I'll just read you what it says on the back of the bottle. Hop Bullet Double IPA features a new technique. We're hitting the beer with a double-barreled slug of Magnum hops and lupulin dust, the source of hop flavor and aroma, right into the fermenter for a ballistic burst of aggressive hop character.
This beer is not too hoppy. They really it makes it sound you'd be nervous if you didn't know you like IPAs. You'd be nervous going into this, but we've had some real hoppy whoppers that are like hard to get down. This really blends smoothly into its flavors.
Yeah. I know what you mean, but that's also because your taste changed.
I think
the more well versed you come to drinking different types of beers, your palate changes.
And I was saying this earlier is I'm starting to grade beers on whether, not just is it good or not, but could you do one and then do you want to get a different beer, whether it's the alcohol is too strong or the flavor palate's too intense, or do you want to say like, no, give me another one of those? This is definitely the latter. Even for being such a strong beer, I would finish it and say like, let me do that again.
Well, you have that option because there's 2 more in the fridge. But
well, I showed up today with a DIY 6-pack I got at the craft beer place in Ridgewood, Queens. And
Mike proved that he's been holding out on the Grande Bouffe all this time, right until the very end, and then he busts out with all the serious craft beers just to go, nah, 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 nah.
I've been avoiding this place. They got it. I took about 50% of their selection for one thing. You know, like I could only have done this twice. They don't have a huge selection at all.
Okay.
And also, like, nothing against the place. Love an independent craft beer bar. It just smells kind of funky.
Ooh.
It smells like they're getting some kegs are spraying everywhere, and then they're just not cleaning up the yeast. It's a little funky in there. I don't know.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
That's no bueno.
So that's my excuse why I've shown up here with like beer that is technically created by Budweiser and Anheuser-Busch.
Oh boy, yeah. This scene. We just happened to be in a particularly potentially controversial scene. I guess it's controversial.
I don't think there's much potential to that. This is where Robert De Niro and Gerard Depardieu have.
They're having a threesome with a girl. She's having an epileptic fit at the moment.
She may or may not be a sex worker, but she has accepted their money in exchange for favors. And there's a pretty nutty scene where you see her manually stimulating, giving handjobs to both the leads at the same time, and you see both of their junks, and it's wild that that's not a more well-known screenshot or postcard that you send to people. But it shows.
So you're talking about Alfredo and Olmo.
And let's talk about what happened in the scene just a little bit. Is Olmo sticks around and cares for this woman in her time of need, and Alfredo, the son of the patriarch, sort of
the Padrone
of the Padrone, he eventually goes to get help, but his first move is to avoid responsibility and leave the scene. And so these are our two leads. But why don't you set us up with who they are from the beginning?
So, as you mentioned before we started recording, the movie really opens on Liberation Day in 1945, but then it cuts back to 1900.
1901.
Is it 1901?
Yeah.
When
despite its
when Giuseppe Verdi dies,
right,
and his death,
the great opera composer,
right, and so his death marks the passing of an epoch and this brave new world of fascism that is taking over Italy and is presented in this micro way between the Padrone and the peasant workers. And so
it happens to be the same day our leads are each born to their respective mothers.
Exactly. So we've got the peasant Olmo and little Lord Fauntleroy, Alfredo.
I'll give you an alternative explanation or theory of what this film starting on the death of Verdi means is nothing, which is what the great Roger Ebert deduced in his infuriating review of this film. It was really panned at the time. It still has a low Rotten Tomatoes score, which we take as sacrosanct on this podcast, I know. But this film has not turned into, as far as I can tell, the Italian Gone with the Wind. At least it's not appreciated as such in this country.
Even though it should be.
It really maybe should be. But, to not just gripe on about person's opinions
there's just so much detail in the film. It's truly an epic film, but I also love the details of the making of it. I think it was made. They were shooting it in 1974, I believe, and it was during the time that De Niro was shooting Taxi Driver. So De Niro was taking flights to New York and driving hack because he drove a taxi in preparation for Taxi Driver. He really drove a cab. So he was taking flights to New York and driving a cab for 18 hours or something, and then going right back to Italy to film this movie.
Wow.
So it's really interesting from just a historic perspective what was going on in these actors' lives. Of course,
And where does Godfather 2 fall?
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to look it up.
Because that came up in...
That's later.
Is it, though? Because I remember reading in the review... well, it may have been filmed later. By the time this came out, the Godfather...
Well, things moved really
duology had been
fast
completed.
for De Niro in the 70s.
Right.
Pretty much as soon as Mean Streets came out, everyone knew who he was, and of course, Scorsese was already had plans for Taxi Driver.
What's your impression of what it meant for an American actor to jump over the pond and do a big Italian epic like this? Were they...
Okay, so the story is Bertolucci had just made more money than God with Last Tango in Paris. He just had amassed a huge fortune from that film and could do whatever he wanted. And so he co-wrote with his brother and another screenwriter. They wrote this, and they had worked together on writing Last Tango. And so, it's a very personal story for Bertolucci because it's about his hometown of Parma, and as much as the stuff is apocryphal, the stories that are being told are anecdotal. He and his brother collected these stories from the people of Parma, and you can see at the beginning how there's a big thank you to them. And I love the painting that the film opens with. So yeah, that's something.
It's of a storytelling style. It seems almost too obvious to say, but it really reminds me of Gabriel Marquez. These like sweeping historical, hyper anecdotal narratives that tell the story of these enormous social change through the lens of people falling in love and their very idiosyncratic characteristics, and then even arguably at the end some not magical realism but almost surrealism.
Yeah, but it does have a little magical realist touch at the end. And what I really like about it is it has that Robert Altman. I think this is the closest that any other filmmaker has come to doing what Robert Altman does with a movie like Nashville, where there's all these people's different stories being told, and they all weave together in very unpredictable and sometimes beautiful and sometimes really ugly ways.
I would have really liked to see a Bertolucci War and Peace. I've seen a few adaptations of it. None of them are able to give the
scope,
the depth, the scope, the complexity, and the interwoven element at all. They'll just focus on Boris and Natasha and Pierre and just kind of leave everyone else in the dust.
Yeah.
And it's really it's useless without having that full like web, and this movie does have a number of characters that track for quite a long time, and characters that die off part of the way through, and it's almost it's the experience of a TV series, and the beloved character gets knocked off part of the way through. They're a character in themselves. They're not just a ploy to have another character go through something.
And they're also not just a trope. Everybody is really tangible as a human being. Everybody in the story is somebody in the story.
And and then another complexity of it, and this, I don't know if I'd bring it up so much if it wasn't a runner through all of Bertolucci's work. Pretty much all the men are very hyper-specifically sexual and problematically sexual from a modern point of view, in a way that it's not what you get from Cold Mountain or the Gone with the Wind or the Sweeping America. What else is in this Sweeping? What I haven't seen? I haven't seen Reds, but Reds seems like a very comparable film from what I know of it.
Yeah.
Does that seem right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that coincidentally, I have to double check, but I think that the cinematographer on this movie,
Vittorio.
Vittorio Storaro, I think that
I believe that's right.
yeah,
He did Reds.
and this Reds was the movie that he did after this one.
Well, he had a lot of practice. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but I obviously, some of the right people saw this movie,
Right.
and thought the right stuff about it. I don't know. When I saw it at 27, it touched me in a way. I guess we all see movies at different times that mean a lot to us, but I think I didn't have a girlfriend or anything. I think I was just going to the Castro Cinema, which is a beautiful, beautiful old cinema. At 8 o'clock on a Thursday night or something, and obviously you don't get home till 2 a.m. But it really made it made a connection with me in a way that no other movie has. And I mean, a lot of it has to do with the charisma of the actors, but it's also the fact that it's somebody who really knows how to tell a story, and it doesn't matter that it's all about these Italians and their culture, their crazy culture that
It's kooky Italian.
oh my God, there's so much. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. You're in it 110%.
Yeah, so you're split the whole time between the uber wealthy landowners, the patrones, the plantation owners, to put it in American terms, really.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
And then the peasants, and it gives you
The slaves.
Essentially, and it gives you a sense of what.
Isn't it crazy that you brought up wanting to do Last Tango,
Mm-hmm.
and then I wanted to do this, and then I pulled out Manderley, because now I think about all the similarities between this movie and Manderley.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities. It's about a community it's about the same size.
Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy. That's what I love about it. It's really about a community, and you can see the way they work shit out in the community. When is he almost father? He's the
patron.
No. He's the head of the peasants.
No, that's his grandfather. Is that Sterling Hayden, I think?
Sterling Hayden's amazing.
So,
oh
yeah,
my God,
I was trying to
he's
figure
so
out.
good.
So Sterling Hayden's almost grandfather. We see his mother the whole time. I inferred
he's the patriarch of the peasants.
Exactly. Yeah. Basically the union boss.
Uh-huh.
So it's pretty much it's a very union management relationship that they have, and there's been unfairness, and so from the
but it's an unofficial union. It's not a real union.
Yeah, and it's really more of a family that collectively works the fields and complains through their patriarch. And early on, you see someone bringing up socialist ideas, and I believe it's the man who's basically the jester of the town, and he's laughed at.
Yeah.
And then the film tracks how that becomes more and more a reality and a desire. And then eventually, about the midway point, there is a full-on Leninist communal home where the elderly are being taught to read for the first time, and there's a real sense of, communism that you pretty much never seen in Western films, and it's this unabashed love story to this Bolshevism that is creating this new way of life, abstract of this hierarchy between the patrones and the peasants. But it's also really real about it. You don't like these peasants are not perfect by any means, and Olmo as the symbol of the kind of the noblest of them is a flawed guy, and so it's a love story that knows that the object of its love is not perfect, and it's actually one of, unlike more Soviet films that are heralding socialism,
but it is
just propaganda.
It is a love story, but it doesn't shy away from the political at all. It dives right into all of it, and it really it's very succinct in its philosophical and I just want to say physical ways that these things manifest.
And it's tracking also how this radical change started developing of workers' rights, and as the Padrone began to lose power and they had to foreclose their homes or like get extra mortgages to keep their farms running, in an unrelated way, fascism came about.
Yeah.
And they make a very, I'm sure, apocryphal show of this when in the church all of the Padrone get together and they pass around the communal offering tray to raise money, basically to pay for the black shirts of the fascists, to make it even kind of more symbolic. And my impression is fascism just sort of happened, and Mussolini rose to power, and people didn't understand it. There's a point where Olmo speaks literally to the camera and is saying, this fascism grew out of the Padrone's hierarchy over them, and you can't have one without the other being the cudgel enforcing it, or the faces, the axe with all the rope around it, whatever.
And then you get this great. I mean, it's obviously the character is an amalgamation of a lot of different people, but Donald Sutherland's character, and this guy is such a fucking piece of work. And
he's next level.
He really is. He is just one of these people who has found the thing that he's going to get noticed for.
Yeah.
And there's so many associations you could draw about this type of person, because he's really a groupthink guy. Mm-hmm. This guy is total groupthink person, and he will do anything to have that status.
This movie's chilling to watch in Trump's America, where there's a power vacuum, there's class struggle, and whoever has been sitting on the sidelines and is sociopathic enough and like weak enough and also
ego-driven
and not intellectual in reality, not have nothing to offer but
just
force and brutality and cruelty.
Just ambition.
And
that's all. Just ambition.
They have ambition and no conscience.
Yeah.
They're like, I got a place in the world finally.
Yeah.
And at the beginning when you see him as the
old guy,
he's the
trying to escape.
A little after that. Uh-huh. The first time chronologically we're introduced to him, he is when
they're baling the hay.
Yeah, what would you call it? He runs the plantation.
He's like a foreman.
Yeah, he's a foreman, and he's being teased, and all the women are throwing grain in his face, and it's like a Chekhov's gun. You're like, this is not gonna go unanswered.
Oh yeah.
And he's kind of smiling, but
you
know on the inside he is just exploding with rage and plotting his revenge, and it comes in a horrifying Holocaust pogrom where he's just lining up villagers in the mud and the rain and shooting them in the head.
Well, and then there's the whole cat scene.
Oh my fucking god! I found even the parts that they showed of the cat scene problematic, like just putting the cat like hanging in the cat in that belt like that. And like the cat clearly didn't like that. You don't need to show things like that. I don't know. I'm not even gonna talk. Let's just say this guy does the opposite of saving a cat in this movie.
Yeah. No, he's a brute. He's a brute and a dumbass and he has that thing. He's a black shirt. Is that the story?
He's a black shirt. That's, I believe, the Italian fascists.
And so he's really into the costume. He's really into the uniform. He's really into feeling like he's the big authoritarian implement truncheon, like physical truncheon. And here's one of the things that I realize. Like every other day, an unarmed black guy gets shot in America. I thought his wrist looked exactly like a gun.
Right.
And I just think about how these guys, because they have the authority and they have the legal exemption.
But they just took it. That's what's so.
The cops.
In
the
America.
cops. Because what happens is they put this uniform on, and they feel empowered. They feel like they're superheroes, and it doesn't, they can get away with anything.
Yeah, well, this is what the 20th century was full of, was countries with a lot of political disarray, and suddenly, I think how scary this would be is if you walk out the Lex and suddenly, like, 50 guys that you didn't know even knew each other,
Yeah.
they're just wearing the same
Right.
the same outfit.
Right.
No one
Right.
told Donald Sutherland's character that he was in charge now. It didn't seem like he even signed up. It's just
Exactly.
he and a bunch of guys. They raise some money and they put on some shirts, and suddenly you have to deal with them.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah.
It's horrifying. And then he's eventually fired by Robert De Niro for his cruelty and being terrible. And it's like, you can't fire me. Like, I'm still wearing this costume. Maybe I don't work for you anymore. Maybe I don't get your measly paycheck, but I have power now, and that's all I ever wanted.
Yeah.
So losing this position means nothing.
Yeah.
And that's when you fucked up. And if you're really on the side of doing good, and you're going to be the noble padrone, the enlightened one who spent time with your gay uncle, being cultured and like learning about the world, you needed to have shown up long before this, and you didn't stop it. And I think we know a lot more about Germany in this period and the rise of fascism there because it got so bad. But it seems like it's a similar story. Is the good Italians didn't speak up and stop this.
Yeah.
Mussolini rose to power with everyone being like, "Oh, whoops, I didn't know how that. Oh, like I didn't know that."
Well, and then also, of course, there are always a few people who try to speak up and they get shot in the head. So, the whole thing about not speaking up. How long has it taken us to get to? What's the girl's name? Is it Emily Gonzalez?
Yeah, Emma Gonzalez.
How long has it taken us to get to Emily Gonzalez? It's crazy. That should have been.
You mean just someone who's seen as a hero for speaking out against being murdered?
Yeah, and somebody who's that person. She's going to step up to the plate and deliver.
Well, it's also about the times. It's in that, like, there are people, there are young Black people from Chicago who have been speaking about it. There are parents from Sandy Hook who are speaking about it. But something, and it's a big mystery of the zeitgeist. But something about it is like, now we're ripe for someone to speak out. That we will listen to. Yeah. And it also goes for evil people.
Yeah.
The time is ripe for a Charlie Chaplin looking motherfucker, or the Mussolini looked like Curly from the Three Stooges.
I just find the whole thing about politicians and world leaders and CEOs to be so befuddling. Sadly, they're all old white guys, which I have to say I take great umbrage about, since I'm of that ilk myself.
It's bad.
It's not a good club to be part of. But what I love about this movie is that it has all of these elements of social destruction and romance and class differences and unity in it, and it has. You could tell that Bertolucci's really trying to work it out. He's really trying to look at what is a utopian society, and where were the mistakes? You're talking about, like, people not standing up and stuff. What did people do or not do? There is the great scene, I have to say, in the beginning when Donald Sutherland and his wife are trying to escape, and all the peasants are coming with the pitchforks.
Yeah, I opened it, and I didn't know Donald Sutherland's character or his wife, and it's horrifying.
It's so terrifying.
There's a Dan Carlin's Hardcore Histories. He does these audio like historical narratives, and they're like 8 hours long, some of them. And he started one similarly where he described what he could find as the most horrifying public execution in world history. He's like, after they removed like their bones from their hands, they poured lead, and then it goes on for like 20 minutes. It's insane. And he's like, Now, would you believe that if I explained why they were doing this to these 5 men, you'd probably see why it made sense, and you might even be down for it. And I'm like, I'll take that challenge. And it has to do with like a religious murder cult that took over a town in Italy, and like hundreds of people died. And and so by the end of it, and it's similar with this movie, you're like, yeah, get that pitchfork.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know.
You've never wanted someone to be publicly massacred
That's a great storytelling device that Bertolucci employs. The storytelling is just so great in this movie. It's so beautiful. You get all of the perspective that you could ever want. He just knows how to give you like the flashback stuff and the flash forward stuff and everything just it tells the story in such a memorable way.
And I think it ends on a note which to bring up Roger Ebert again, he did not appreciate and seem to get at all, but I thought it was brilliant. It ends with
Almo and Alfredo. They're
Almo
old.
and Alfredo
They're
again.
old guys.
They even like a bit before that, the partisans, the coalition of non-fascist governments have taken over, and they take all the weapons, and so communism, as we've seen it in this town, is kind of having to cooperate to give concessions to other versions of what Italy should be. And they come and they take all the guns, and then the giant red flag made of all the other red flags is taken off into the field and is going off in the distance. And Almo and Alfredo are just start fist fighting each other. The Padrone and the field worker and the peasant.
Yeah.
And it zooms out and you think the movie's going to end, but then it comes back and it's them shuffling down a road, and they are 35 years older.
Yeah.
And
they're old
they're
dudes.
still just fist fighting. And then almost sits down and so spoilers, but it's worth unpacking. Almost sits down, drinks from a bottle, and Alfredo, as they challenged each other to do when they were kids, lies down on the train tracks, but this time he lies down across it with his head on the rail as the train is coming, and then before we see it, it's a flashback to him as a kid beneath the train. But I don't know what is wrong with Ebert. It's a very beautiful, abstract, but like instantly, I think, intuitable thing is if the Padrone are ever really going to go away, if there is going to be a removal of class structure, it is going to come from, and this is a Marxistly, controversial thing to say, but it will come from the Padrone, the patriarchy, laying itself on the tracks of progress.
Yeah.
It'll have to be a self-suicide, because otherwise, you're going to. I mean, you can kill them and you can remove them, but they'll come back.
They come back. Yeah. Well, that's always the problem is that they. Yeah.
But what a cool like the rest of the movie's not like that.
No, I know. No, I'm glad you articulated it, because that's one of the things I love about the movie is you can't help but at a certain point late in the movie go, okay, well, where is this all going? Like, how is he going to wrap all this up? And he does it so elegantly. It's such a beautiful
it's
ending.
I don't give a shit about the end of Gone with the Wind at all. Maybe I need to rewatch it, but it's so, because it's just about their relationship. I don't know. Is it about the South? Is it about the women post-war? But like, frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. Like what the fuck is going on in that? Like, I don't know. It just feels very like it's epic, but it feels very small. Like I don't see the grand.
Well, it is small because it's about this neurotic bipolar feminine creature who's just such the worst example of humanity. She's just such a spoiled brat, and
then
and then you've got
Shots fired, Scarlett.
And then you've got Rhett Butler, who's just a womanizing cad. He's he is the definition of a cad.
Yeah.
But he falls for her, even though he knows she's batshit crazy, and it's not going to go well. He decides to try and chase this little butterfly piece of tail,
And
it's a big mistake, and he gets the hell out of there as anybody would.
Why is this the story of the American Civil War? Why is it? It just seems like it's a bodice ripper set during the Civil War that was made into.
That's all it is.
That Zanuck made into.
That's
right.
all it is. But it's just because he spent a lot of time on the battle scenes and blah 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 blah. But the movie would be probably better without that stuff. But that is what the people, that's what everyone really latches onto. And especially, I mean, I remember, it was a big deal when my mom took me to see Gone with the Wind when I was 8 years old in 1970, whatever it was, I guess. I remember it, and I remember all of the hullabaloo around it because, of course, part of it was shot in Richmond, and Richmond was the capital of the South, and la la la.
Jeffy Davy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there? Do you think there's an American historical epic that, not to toot this movie's horn too much, but kind of holds up to it that I would
not
now
a chance.
that I would
not
now
a chance.
like view like
Nothing.
I mean,
nothing.
You got to go into The Godfather basically, which
Yeah.
is an interesting film because it there's like a crossover of cast in that and virtually the exact same time period, and also Godfather 1 and 2 combined, which is essentially one film.
Okay,
is
yeah.
the
So
same
Godfather
runtime as
Godfather
this whole
was 72.
And Godfather 2, which is the one with De Niro, was 74.
So
it's
yeah,
about
same year.
roughly the same year. So they probably filmed 2 before this, I'm sure. And then when 2 came out, they were filming.
Yeah, who knows? I
Yeah.
mean, De Niro was a busy guy that year. There's no question about it. And I don't know. I just I love the scene when they show up and they're baling hay and Sutherland's the foreman and they all look like they're about 20 years old or 24 or something. And so much of that is just the acting. It's one of those scenes that I really always like.
It's good makeup work, but it's also great acting because there's a way to hold your face and your body that makes you seem young.
Exactly.
While Sutherland gets a pretty bad bald cap towards the end.
Yeah, that's true.
He does age very believably 30 years in the film.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Depardieu, I mean, God, he's just so handsome. I don't really care what age he is.
I know. He's exquisite. He's so damn good. You just can't even. I don't know.
This is by far the best, and in any of the 4 or so films we've watched with him for this podcast, this is far and away the best.
Yeah.
He's both reined in the most, but he also, it's almost like in his contract he has to be able to get really angry and be scary and violent, but for the most part he is the sensitive one in this film. He's the reserved idealist.
Absolutely.
And De Niro is the fop. That's a unique role for him.
Yeah. And same story for him. He's probably a 26-year-old actor, and he's got to play a guy in his 70s or 80s by the end of the thing. I mean, his chops are there. I don't know. It's just there's so much great stuff about this movie. I'm glad we did this film before you cut out because
absolutely.
I can watch this movie and talk about this movie.
We're watching
day.
clips right now, and I watched this movie. I think I finished it yesterday morning. And I could do it again. I could just jump in. There's something else going on. It does remind me of The Godfather in that respect. I'm going on watching The Godfather on average twice a year and not being bored by it.
Well, who was the cinematographer on The Godfather?
The cinematographer.
I'll look it up.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I can tell you the word.
Because they're shot in a very similar vein.
This has a more nuanced color grading. I think the film stock on this is more interesting, and they do the thing where certain storylines are graded a certain way. All of the scenes with the fascists are very gray and morose, and the peasant stories are more like
Gordon Willis was the cinematographer
Click on his
on
credits.
Godfather.
Yeah, I don't remember his backstory.
So he shot Woody Allen's Manhattan. He shot All the President's Men.
Zelig, which is actually a very impressive cinematography credit, because he recreated the style, very different styles.
The Parallax View, The Paper Chase. Yeah. Purple Rose of Cairo. So
Yeah,
he
a lot of Woody Allen.
and he did Godfather 3. And the pickup artist, which is what's that guy?
The pickup artist?
Yeah, James Toback. That's another. Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for listening. I really hope that you will just Google Cole Smithey and Patreon and give us some of your monthly cash to help support Le Grande Bouffe. And I really hope that you guys will, if you haven't ever seen 1900,